Welcome to this presentation on response to intervention. What we'll be talking about is Mississippi response to intervention. Now, across the country, all areas of the country are using response to intervention, but in some states it's a 3-tier model, some states it's a 5-tier model, it could even be a 4-tier model. And so we want to know specifically what Mississippi does in response to intervention. So what you see is we have a 3-tier model. Tier 1 is quality classroom instruction. Tier 2 is focused and targeted supplemental instruction. And Tier 3 is intensive interventions. You see that it is a continuum of services that a child can access in both directions. So they can go from Tier 1 to Tier 2 to Tier 3, back to Tier 2. They can bounce back and forth among these 3 tiers for their entire school career without setting foot in a special education classroom. RTI is not a special ed process. It is a general ed process, and so it's really important to understand that. It connects to special ed, and we'll talk a little bit about how. Also, you need to know that the model serves both academic and behavioral concerns. And so we do the Tier 3 model for kids with behavior problems and for kids with academic problems. So, in the old days, we would have this kid who. Teacher would come up to a special ed teacher and say, I have this kid who. And it was all based on teacher tolerance. If the kid got on my nerves, then I would go talk to somebody to see if I could get them to be somewhere other than with me. It was based on academic failure, so a child had to fail 1 or 2 years to get into the system. It was based on behavioral disruption, not whether the kid was having trouble accessing education, but whether he was getting on people's nerves. And then based on daydreaming and poor work habits. We had to wait for the child to fail before we could intervene. Nowadays, I have this kid who turns into response to intervention. So now in Tier 1, all children who have academic deficits measured by how different their performance is from other kids, children who have behavior deficits, in other words, how different is their behavior from other kids of the same age in the same setting, and attention deficits, how well is the child able to pay attention to what he needs to do to get the work done. And we do universal screening of all 3 of these areas: attention, behavior, and academics. RTI, the definition from the State Department, is a single, well-integrated, multi-tiered service delivery system. It connects general, remedial, and special education through scientifically based research in instructional practices. In Mississippi, we have a teacher support team that connects to the 3rd tier of the 3-tier model. So what are the dimensions of RTI? First, we have RTI for the classroom, and then we have RTI for identification of learning disabilities. So in the classroom, RTI includes Tier 1, which is universal screening and differentiation of instruction for all children. So 100% of the kids are in Tier 1. It's just good teaching in your classroom. Tier 2 is intensive intervention done by the teacher or other professional. And then Tier 3 is intensive intervention directed by the teacher support team. In contrast, the RTI for identification of learning disabilities, what we do there is we take the data from Tier 3, we use additional assessments in the special ed referral process to determine whether this child has a discrepancy between ability and achievement that is not being caused by a lack of opportunity to learn. So what the 3-tier model demonstrates is that this child was given quality instruction that was individualized for them, and they did not respond to that intervention. So the rationale. What we had was that traditionally, children who were at risk for failing were sent to special ed, and we ended up with an over-identification of minority groups. This way, we have a systematic approach for interventions in the general ed environment. We identify struggling kids before they fail, and we give struggling children support throughout the educational process. So the way it has worked is this. The number of students aged 6 to 21 that receive IDEA Part B services, which is that age range, has gone down 3.9% since 2004. And the number of students with a specific learning disability has gone down 12%. So the way it works is that we have children in Tier 1 who are receiving instruction. In Tier 2, we get more intensive instruction. And then in Tier 3, we have the teacher support team. The basics. What we see is that 80 to 90% of kids are just receiving Tier 1 interventions. Now keep in mind, all children are getting Tier 1, but an additional 5 to 10% get Tier 2. And this is for some students who are at risk. It's high efficiency, it's rapid response. Now keep in mind that we have on this side the academic systems and on this side the behavioral systems. Then 1 to 5% of kids are getting intensive individual interventions on an individual basis, assessment-based, high intensity, and of longer duration. So what are the interventions? They're based on progress monitoring, so we're going to record and monitor the interventions that we use. We're going to use classroom teachers, specialized teachers, and external interventionists where necessary. And we're going to use individual, small group, and or technology-assisted interventions. Let me look at a list of things that interventions are not. Interventions are not preferential seating. They're not shortened assignment. They're not parent contacts. They're not classroom observations. They certainly are not suspension. And they're not doing more of the same. And they're not retaining the kid for a year. And they're not peer tutoring. All of these are accommodations. These are things that we're going to do in Tier 1 just to adjust instruction for children that are struggling. What we want to do is we want to monitor progress to see if children are making adequate progress so we can see who's having problems before they begin to fall behind. We want to modify instruction early so that every child gets essential skills, and we want to monitor student progress throughout their school career. Tier 1 is for everybody. It uses multiple grouping. It uses 90 minutes of quality instruction based on the benchmarks that we have set, and we're going to test 3 times a year to make sure that everybody's making progress. Tier 2 are kids who didn't respond to Tier 1. We're going to use homogeneous small group instruction, 1 to 3, 1 to 4, or 1 to 5, 30 minutes a day, 2 to 3 times a week. And we're going to progress at least twice a month, but preferably weekly, so that we can actually see what progress the child is or is not making. Tier 3 is more intensive. It's for kids who didn't respond to either Tier 1 or Tier 2. So we actually can bump a kid from Tier 1 all the way to Tier 3 if it's obvious that he's going to need extensive intervention right away. Minimum of 230 minutes per day. Smaller groups, 1 to 1, 1 to 2, or 1 to 3. And we want to monitor twice a week, the minimum weekly. So, Tier 1 universal screening, we're going to screen grades K through 8 and all those kids who are taking the special area tests in high school. We're going to test 3 to 4 times a year. We're going to use screening tools, and we're going to measure, we're going to use effective instruction, active engagement, high success rate, increased content coverage, direct instruction, scaffolded instruction, critical knowledge forms, strategic, explicit. In other words, all the things that we know is just good teaching. Here are the things we're going to screen for. The first set are going to be things that have to do with language, phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, reading fluency, comprehension. The next set are math, counting, quantity discrimination, sequential ordering, mathematical fluency, math reasoning. And then the next set are the special area tests. We're also going to look at behavior. We're going to make sure that we're using scientifically based research. We're going to make sure we're differentiating instruction, that we're aligned to the state standards. We're going to look at classroom behavior management, behavior support on the district level, what our instructional leaders are doing, instructional support, classroom observations, and follow-up procedures for any instructional personnel that are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and this is really important, family and community involvement. Tier 2, exact same set of stuff, but what we're going to be doing on Tier 2 is we're going to make sure that we're collecting that data. And then on Tier 3, exactly the same stuff, but on Tier 3, we're going to make sure that the teacher support team is involved. So who's on this magical teacher support team? Well, the staffing is determined by the needs of the students. So we're going to have 3 to 7 professionals. The instructional leader is going to be the principal. By the way, the research says that's not who it should be. The research says that when the principal's in there, it makes the teacher self-conscious, but Mississippi has chosen to go that way, so that's what we have. There are core members that are on every team, and then there are floating members who are brought in under special circumstances. The team functions to clarify the student's needs, to collect and analyze data, to design or redefine the intervention process, to be accessible to the referring teacher, and to assign support personnel to make sure that the intervention is being carried out the way it was designed. All this information comes from the Mississippi State Department of Education and a few other sources, and you have those sources here on this PowerPoint. Hope this was helpful.